Good morning, everybody. So today we are going to be chatting about working with sellers. So the agenda looked very, very comprehensive this morning to Jennifer, but I have to assure her and you that really what we're going to be doing is just talking about each one of these topics with working with sellers. We have lots of materials that go along with it. So I'll be sharing those with you at the conclusion of the call via email, and those will be more deep dives into each one of the topics. So instead, we're just going to be talking about working with sellers today. And as always, I still have a Get Business Quick idea for you at the end of today's class. So the first thing I want to do is just welcome you all and thank you very much for being on the call. And then secondly, we're going to start talking about working with sellers, and we're going to jump straight to listing appointments. So really, your goal when generating leads and generating interest in real estate is to try to get into a listing appointment with a seller. So that you have to break all of these pieces down into small parts. So when you're looking to talk to somebody about buying or selling with real estate, you're doing that in the hopes that they want to go look at properties if they're a buyer, or sit down with you and talk about selling their house if they're a seller. Now, I'll tell you, most real estate agents who do a ton of business do a lot of listings. And the reason why is that if I'm working with a seller, I'm going to do several hours of upfront work. I'm going to be meeting with them. I'm going to be running a comparative market analysis to see how much their home should be marketed for. I'm going to be meeting with them and going through the house and taking a look to see what other items I think need to be completed before we put it on the market. We're going to be meeting perhaps with landscapers and painters and trying to get all that work done. I'm also going to be meeting with a photographer and getting the marketing materials finished. But once I've completed all that and I've clicked the Make Live button on MLS, I'm not going to say I'm going to stop working on that. But honestly, I'm going to just sort of be maintaining that listing and maintaining the marketing plan for that listing. Unlike if I'm working with a buyer, where I'm going to tell you right now, I'm working with some buyers for Botetourt County. I've been to Botetourt County 6 of the last 7 evenings. And we're going out there every night looking at the 1 or 2 properties that came on the market. Honestly, that is much more of a time commitment working with a buyer than it is working with a seller. So agents who have lots of closings every year, they do tend to focus on working with sellers because you can just serve many, many, many more clients if they are sellers than buyers. There's a finite amount of time every week I have to be in my car running between houses and showing houses, right? So let's today focus on getting listings. The reason why everybody doesn't have a million listings is sellers are a little more elusive about wanting to sell. Buyers will tell everybody they meet that they want to start shopping for a house. And they're constantly asking people, do you know of anybody who has a house that's going to be going on the market in this neighborhood? We love this neighborhood. We love this town. We want to live here. And they're asking everybody they know. Sellers are not telling everybody that they want to sell their house, because they're quite nervous that if they put it out there that they'd like to sell their house, they're going to have 10 real estate agents waiting on their front porch that evening. So, and that's not inaccurate. I know many agents who would be waiting on their porch to talk to them. So sellers tend to be a little more quiet about it. So you have to do a little more digging and a little more detective work to find out if they are indeed wanting to sell their house. Now, Samantha shared on an earlier call this morning that it's very common for her to go talk to clients in her own neighborhood. She indicated that a lot of those sellers have lived there a long time. They're nearing retirement home age, and so likely those properties may come on the market. I'll also tell you that anytime you list a property in a neighborhood, that is when you want to go around the neighborhood and hand out a flyer and talk to everyone in the neighborhood. The street that I grew up on is currently seeing a lot of turnover. Some of that may just be because each one of those folks were ready to move, but a lot of it is they see what other homes are selling for, and they decide they maybe need to go ahead and sell too. So that's a street that didn't really have any sales for 8-10 years. And now 4 or 5 or 6 properties have been sold or are going on the market. Now, I have had 3 of them because I've had my ear to the ground and making sure I'm communicating with everybody on the street, making sure they know what the other houses in the neighborhood have been selling for. 2 slipped through my fingers, and I had no idea they were interested in selling. One, it was constructed 4 years ago. There's no way I could have guessed that those sellers were wanting to go ahead and sell and move somewhere else in the city. But if you can stay tuned in to your farm areas, and a farm area is an area in which you stay active, and every time you have a listing, that should become part of your new farm area. So if I sell a house in a certain neighborhood, I'm going to walk around and get to know everybody and hand out flyers or send them postcards or mailings or drop a little tiny baby pumpkin on their front porch at Halloween. There are all sorts of things you can do to sort of farm a neighborhood. And what you're doing is you're trying to plant the seed that you are the real estate expert for that area, and that if they have any questions about real estate in that area, then they should be calling you. Now, you can go to realtor.org, or you can go to Inman, or you can go to lots of resources online to get ideas of farming. Shoot, you can even go to Pinterest and put in real estate farming ideas, and they're going to give you all sorts of ideas. So there's no shortage of things you can do. A lot of them are free. A lot of them cost just time and energy, and they really will pay off. So a lot of the agents here in town who have been doing real estate for a very long time have certain neighborhoods that they market to. And so when a house goes on the market, I'm not surprised when I see their yard sign go in the yard. It's what they've been working towards. It's what they've been dedicating their time to. So in this case, what we're going to talk about with working with sellers is how to get listing appointments. So one very easy way to do it I'm sorry?
Sorry.
No, that's okay. So one thing we're going to talk about, and I was hearing Jennifer out in the hallway, so I'm sorry, I was acting distracted. So one thing with listing appointments is what you're trying to do is you're just trying to get a conversation with a seller who may potentially want to sell their house down the road. So really, you're talking to everybody you know who might be interested in selling. And if you find out that a seller is interested, you're not going in saying, hey, I'm ready to sell your house. You're going in saying, hey, I hear you might be curious about what your house might be worth. Because that may be all it is. They just may be curious what their house is worth. I think it's very important to remember that repeat business is a real thing. You should be reaching out to past clients every year and just saying, hey guys, just wanted to give you a snapshot of what your house is worth now. And almost always it's going to be worth more than when they bought it. And that gives you an opportunity to say, yay, I'm so excited to see that you're building equity in your home. But it also may hit a tipping point where one of those years when you send them that CMA or that report reporting how much their home is now worth, that may be a tipping point for them where they say, you know what, we've been thinking about moving. Let's go ahead and have Ashley come over and see what she would like for us to do to get it market ready. So that is a very easy way to make sure you get repeat business. I, of course, will tell you that in the 18 years I've been doing this, I have missed out on repeat business before. That's not my seller's fault. That is my fault for not staying in touch with my clients. So it's my duty to make sure I'm staying in touch with them and providing them resources past the point of the sale I made with them. So one way to do it really effectively is to provide them the value of their home. That's something no one is ever going to turn down. I've owned my house now for 4 years. I'm interested to see what a CMA would be about it. I'm interested to see how much equity I may have in my home now. And in many cases, if that buyer used an FHA mortgage to purchase the home and there is private mortgage insurance on their mortgage, they may have reached the point where now they may not have to have that in place anymore. So it might actually spur a conversation with them that they may want to reach out to their mortgage lender and see if perhaps they've dropped below the threshold of where private mortgage insurance is still required. And you may be saving them hundreds of dollars a month, and it wouldn't have occurred to them without you reaching out to them. So talk to your lenders that you're frequently using and talk to them about where is that magic number where private mortgage insurance is no longer required, and what steps do sellers need to go through in order to have that private mortgage insurance removed. And use those resources to provide to your past clients so that they can have that private mortgage insurance removed when it's time. Now, the other thing you're trying to do is you're just trying to help them understand what other homes have come on the market. So a really, really effective way to touch back to past clients is when you see a house on the hot sheet go on the market and you know you sold a house right around the corner, shoot an email to your past client and say, hey guys, I know you're not ready to move, but I just thought you'd be interested in seeing that a house around the corner went on the market. Can you believe it went on the market for $350,000? Exclamation point. Call me if you want more info. And send them, the public version of the MLS sheet on it with all the photos attached. And you might even say something in there like, I know how much you love your neighborhood. If you have somebody you'd love to have be your neighbor, tell them to call me. I'll get them in and show them the house. So you may end up making another sale in that neighborhood by just reaching out to your past client and saying, wouldn't you love to have one of your friends be your neighbor? Why don't you let me know the names of anybody you have in mind who might be interested in that property? You can also do that on Facebook. You're not allowed to advertise other people's listings. You can advertise other listings in our firm, but you can't advertise other firms' listings without the listing agent's permission. But you could share it in a private message to your past client on Facebook and say, hey, did you see that this house just went on the market? Do you know of anybody who might want to live around the corner from you? And that's just an easy way when you're checking the hot sheet. Just keep in mind where you've sold houses before. And if you see one that pops up in a neighborhood that you've sold in, go ahead and let that past client know. And that takes us to comparative market analysis. So a comparative market analysis is just a comparison of the home that is the subject property to other homes that have sold in the market. Now, I may use comparative market analysis for many different purposes. I'm definitely using it when I'm getting ready to list a house so that the seller knows potentially how much we could sell the house for. I'm going to include active, pending, and sold comparatives in that CMA. And the reason why I'm including the actives is I want to take a look at what our current competition is. And I'm also going to use those active listings as a way to fine tune our listing price. So I recently had a house go on the market and there was one across the street that went on the market the same day. Very similar houses, different, but very, very similar. Theirs was listed at $528. Ours was listed at $529,900. We had a moment where we had to decide whether we wanted to be the more expensive of the two houses. We ultimately decided that ours had a few features the other one didn't. Namely, we had two-car garages instead of one two-car garage. And we thought that that would support us being on the market for, a little bit more than the one across the street. Now, if the one across the street had gone on the market for $515, we may have really needed to consider our timing entering the market or some sort of marketing strategy to sort of potentially put our best foot forward on what extra value we were bringing, since we were going to be priced so much higher than the other one. It just so happened we were priced within a stone's throw of each other, so we just went ahead and went with the price we had already decided we were going to market it for. Now, when you do the CMA for a seller, do not do a CMA for a seller unless you've been in the home and looked at the home. I do have agents from time to time, and from time to time I mean weekly, which is absolutely fine, send me an address and say, hey, I'm running a CMA on this house, but I'm having trouble finding comparatives. Now, I'm always happy to help you with that, and I'm always happy to look over your CMA. The only restriction I'm going to have is I haven't been in the home. I don't know the condition of the property. I don't know if they've upgraded the countertops. I don't know if they have finished out the basement. So it's going to be very difficult for me to be able to do an apples to apples comparison on that. I can look over your CMA and make sure there aren't any glaring mistakes or something maybe you missed, or look through and make my own CMA off of that address and make sure there aren't any properties you've missed. But it's going to be difficult for me to give my own idea as to what I think it's worth if I haven't been in there and seen the condition of the home or any updates. This also points to my next tip, which is don't go to a listing appointment with a price in your head. And especially if you take a CMA with you to show them the comparable properties in the area, you can uncheck the box that will show the price recommendation, and I would recommend you do that. You do not want to go into a seller's house for the first time and already have a price recommendation in your report, because what's going to happen is you're either going to underprice it or overprice it. Underpricing it is dangerous because then they don't trust your judgment, right? Overpricing it is much more dangerous because they're definitely going to hire you, and you're definitely going to have your yard sign in front of that house for a year and it's not going to sell. And you're going to have a very difficult time trying to convince them that it's not worth what you said it was worth. But the problem is, if you go in with that price recommendation, you're the expert. They believe you. But then you get in there and you realize, oh man, they have really, really lived hard in this house. And it smells really very heavily of cigarette smoke, and the carpet is very, very dirty. And unfortunately, you were basing it off of the previous listings photos and assumed that they had kept up with the maintenance on their home, and perhaps they've not. So I would not go into my first listing appointment with a price in, I may have a price in my mind, but I'm certainly not going to put it on paper, and I'm not going to name my price. Now, there probably is going to be a moment during the listing appointment where they're going to ask you what you think their home is worth. That happens all the time. And I have a prepared answer for that, which is, you know what? I wanted to get in here and I wanted to take a look at all these fantastic upgrades you've made. And now that I've seen what you've done in here, I've got to go back and I've got to look at the numbers again. And would it be okay if tomorrow I call you and we go over the comparables that I've found? And then before I leave, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to go crunch all these numbers, but I guarantee you nobody knows this house better than you. Just your gut. What do you think your house is worth? Sometimes, once in a rare while, I'll have somebody say, I want to see what your number is first. That's fine. But 95% of the time, they're going to tell me what they think their house is worth. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to assess before I try hard for this listing. I'm trying to assess how realistic they are in today's market. So if they list a price that is just gangbusters higher than what I have in my head, I may go home and reassess whether I want to work with them as an agent or not. And I know when you're new, it can be very intimidating to give up business. But I promise you that 6 months with an overpriced listing is going to correct you of that habit, because it is super depressing to have a property listed for 6 months that you know you can't sell and it's not getting shown. And the seller is texting you every other day wanting to know why their house isn't getting shown. It's going to zap you of your confidence and it's going to make you feel ineffective when really it's just that the house is overpriced. So please try not to give them a price when you're there. It can feel very much like you're on the spot, and that if you're a professional, you'll just know. I'm here to tell you, I've been doing this 18 years. I don't know off the top of my head. I may have a general gut feel as to what houses in the neighborhood have been selling for, but there is no way, even as long as I've been doing this, there's no way I'm going to know to the dollar how much this house is worth just by going in and looking around. Okay. So please have the confidence to tell them that you would not want to give them a number that you don't feel confident in. You'd rather go back and look and see what the comparatives say. Also, it doesn't hurt to ask them, hey, do you know if any houses in your neighborhood have sold recently that weren't listed by a real estate agent? They may say, oh yeah, my next door neighbor's house, they sold it to a family member and they had an appraisal and it sold for X. That's a good number to know. And I am going to tell you, people know what's selling in their neighborhood. They know when somebody sells to an aunt or to a granddaughter, and they know typically how much it sold for. So that's a comp that you're not going to find otherwise. So it's worth asking the question. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay. So The last item on my agenda regarding listings and working with sellers was just to talk about using those active homes as your current competitive data. So I'm going to look up all the active properties in that area for a couple of pieces of information. I want to know how many days they've been on the market, because I want to be able to set expectations for my seller. Okay. If every house in that neighborhood has sold by day 3, what I might be doing is I might be telling my seller, which is, I have a new listing coming on next weekend, and this is what I've told them. We are seeing multiple offers on almost every home that is listed at a competitive price and is in good condition. So what I'm recommending to them is, let's get the photos done on Wednesday. Let's make it live on Friday morning, and I want you to go out of town. I want you to come back Sunday night, and we're going to review offers. Now, that may seem bold, but that is what is happening in our market right now. And quite frankly, I don't want them in town. I don't want them coming back to the house and then leaving the house and they feel frustrated, and they've got 7 showings on Saturday, and they've had to basically bounce around coffee shops and friends' houses all day long. So I'm telling them to go out of town. Everybody who's going to come see the house next weekend, we're going to give everybody an opportunity until Sunday evening. And then Sunday evening, when they come back into town, we're going to review offers. And if we have enough offers and we have an offer that appeals to us, then they'll likely ratify one of those contracts. And I'm actually going to send them out of town so that I can list it as vacant for the weekend. And I'm going to put in the private remarks, I'm going to list it as a vacant listing so anybody who wants to go see it can go see it. But I'm going to put in the private remarks, occupied home, but sellers are out of town for the weekend, feel free to show as a vacant property. And that way we can get maximum numbers of buyers into that home throughout the weekend, and we can potentially bring the most offers to the table. So communication with your seller about their expectations is what I'm looking at when I look at other active properties in their neighborhood. If I see that every house has taken 3 months to sell, I need to set that expectation for my seller. And I need to talk to them about what is their motivation in getting this home sold. Are they able to have their house on the market for 3 months? If they're not, we may need to look very hard at what their listing price is going to be. We may need to underprice it if they've maybe already gone under contract on another home and they need to perform on this house in order to move forward with their new home. We may want to price it more aggressively. We may not have 3 months to sit around and wait for the perfect buyer. Okay? So look at the pendings, look at the closed. Don't hesitate to call the listing agent on the pending ones and say, hey, Katrina, I see you have a pending contract on your listing down the street. I'm getting ready to put mine on the market. Any advice for me? Do you mind sharing with me if you got at or above listing price? I'm just trying to fine tune my listing price. A lot of times agents will be very open and share that information with you. Sometimes they won't. They don't want to jinx their luck. They don't want to have their house come back on the market and they've told you how much it sold for. But sometimes they'll share that with you. Or most of the time they'll just give you an idea. They'll say, well, we didn't get full list price, but we got pretty close. Well, that's going to help me fine tune that listing price for when we go on the market. Okay, so reach out to other agents and ask them for help. And that is all I have today on just our overview of working with sellers. I know I did not do a deep dive on any of that, but we're going to have handouts on all of it, and I'm happy to send them all to you. Also, when you're working with sellers, once they go under contract, there's a whole nother set of responsibilities you're going to have working with them. And so we do have our handout from contract to closing, working with sellers, and that takes you step by step all the way through the process. So I'll be sharing that resource with you as well. Who has any questions about any of that before we move on to our Get Business Quick idea for the day?
I do.
Please. I can't believe there's something you don't know about working with sellers, Samantha, but please ask away.
When I go in for my pre-listing appointment, and I take pictures of the house, and I usually have a tape recorder, so when I'm walking with the seller, I'm asking them questions, so I'll have that information instead of taking time to write it. But I always ask the main question when we're sitting down going over the listing agreement, not signed, just showing them what they're going to be signing. What is it that you expect to walk away with?
Mm-hmm.
And that way, I might have a figure that's higher than what they're thinking, so that way I can work my figures backwards.
That's right. And using a seller's net sheet is very helpful.
Always do.
Yes. So we have a seller's net sheet available on Zip Forms, and it's under the Wainwright Library. So you can toggle from the RVAR library to the Wainwright Library. And there's something there called a seller's net sheet. And I do work one of those up with my seller before I put it on the market. Number one, I want to make sure they're selling it and they're not going to have to bring money to the table. So in the case of the house I was showing last night, that seller is getting transferred for work and has only owned the house 9 months. They're selling the house for $9,000 more than they bought it for 9 months ago, and that won't even cover commissions. So that seller is likely going to have to bring money to the table to close on that house. Now, potentially her relocation company is going to make up for that, and that's why she's selling. But if I sit down with my sellers and I do a seller's net sheet, which just simply details, this is how much we're listing the house for, so potentially it'll sell for X dollars. Then we have to pay commissions, closing costs. We have to pay off their first mortgage. We have to pay off their equity line. And they will be walking away with X dollars. That X dollars needs to be a positive number. If it is a negative number, your seller needs to reevaluate how much they need to sell their house for, and it may price them out of the market. So if they took out an equity line 2 years ago and they used that money to pay down credit card debt and they did not put it into the house, they may not be able to sell their home and walk away with any money. That may still be worth it to them. They may have gotten out of $40,000 worth of credit card debt and they're happy to bring $2,000 to close on this house. That may be worth it to them. But you need to work up that seller's net sheet to make sure that they're actually going to be walking away with some money, or if they're not, they need to know that with eyes wide open. It also is very instrumental in helping go ahead and decide in their mind and your mind what is going to be an acceptable seller's net. And the seller's net is the purchase price minus any closing costs they're expected to pay on the buyer's behalf. So if we get an offer of $305,000 with $5,000 in buyer paid closing costs, that seller's net is really $300,000. Because as soon as my seller receives the $305,000, they're immediately having to give $5,000 to the buyer for their closing costs. So it's really as if that offer was $300,000. So we really need to know what's going to be an acceptable seller's net. That helps in the future when you start getting offers. You already know whether that offer is going to work or not. And when I call them and say, hey guys, we just got an offer. Unfortunately, they're offering us $298 and asking for $5,000 in closing costs. That seller's net is going to be X. Then you already know that's not going to work for them. And it helps you already know what your counteroffer should be, right? So having that conversation with your seller up front and making sure they understand what seller's net is very important. Because otherwise they're going to get an offer of $305 asking for $5,000 in buyer paid closing costs, and they're going to think they're being offered $305,000 for their house. You need to make sure they understand what seller's net is. Don't assume that they know that the buyer paid closing costs are going to come right off the top. Okay. Anybody have anything to add? Jennifer?
Amanda has a question in the chat. She would like to hear advice on CMAs for land listings.
Well, I wish I had some good advice to give. Land listings are hard. They're very difficult to compare. You're lucky if you can find others in the area, and you have to decide, you have to compare them. Is it a level lot? Is it heavily wooded? Is it upslope? Is there sewer and water hookups available? Has the city or the county run hookups to that area? So some of that is doing some research ahead of time before you list it and being able to say in the private remarks, public access to water and sewer available on the street. That's going to be helpful for someone to know and potentially would make that property more valuable than if it's down a long dirt road and it's going to have to be well and septic. So hookup fees to hook up to the municipal utilities, you want to be able to compare those costs to installing well and septic. It's also going to have lots to do with other sales in the area. I often find that when I do land CMAs, I'm having to go back 2 years, not my 12 months that I like to do, You know, for residential listings, I like to go back 6 months. I will go to 12 months if I have to, but with land, I may have to go 2 years or even 3 years. And then just, you know, a lot of times I'm basing it on what the seller really wants out of the property. You know, land is, in my opinion, land and big farms and things like that, they're very difficult to compare because you're not going to find, you know, if you're comping a brick ranch in town, I can find you 10 of those. If you're comping a lot all by itself off of Plantation Road, I don't really have that many others that have sold in that area that I can compare to. So I don't have a good answer for you on that, Amanda, but I do encourage you to call me if you have that come up and you need to sort of have somebody else to bounce it off of.
She said the eye roll said it all.
I mean, I would love to tell you there's a exact science to doing it, but the problem is there aren't comps, you know, and that's the moment where I go, thank goodness I'm not an appraiser, because appraisers don't get to say, let's just try this price and see how it goes. They have to find comps. You know, I was in Boone's Mill with a client a week ago or so, and we were looking at an old church turned Mason's Lodge that he wanted to turn into a residential home with like a restaurant in the back building. How in the world am I going to comp that for him? You know, and I had to tell him that. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea what this is worth. You know, it is a very niche property that I certainly am not going to be able to find another church / Mason's Lodge with a detached building that could be a restaurant, even in Boone's Mill, even in probably all of Roanoke. So at that point, we're going to be guessing a little bit, you know, and the appraiser is going to be guessing a little bit. So there are going to be some weird niche properties that are going to be difficult to do. So reach out to me, reach out to Jennifer. We'll help you with it as best we can.
And always check zoning.
And check zoning. Yes, that's right.
That lot I listed on Shenandoah, I said, do you know what it's zoned for? And he said it was zoned for light manufacturing. And it took me a week to get hold of Philip Moore, who's the zoning guy down at Roanoke City. He said, no, ma'am, it's an R5. It is not light manufacturing. So check your details before you put that listing in, because
that's right. And do not trust a previous listing.
Amen to that, because that was in the previous listing.
Yeah, do that research yourself. Well, I mean, the one I was showing last night that another local real estate agent had owned until 9 months ago, I looked at the old listing. He had it listed as a shared septic system, and he was the agent and the owner at the time. The new listing is reporting it as public sewer. Now, maybe in the last 9 months, they've hooked up to public sewer. I doubt it. So, you know, that's something I'm certainly going to verify if my folks are going to write an offer, because there's a big difference between a shared septic system and public sewer.
You can't get a loan on a shared septic system, can you?
Sometimes it can. It could be a community system, which most lenders are okay with, as long as, you know, it's a real community system. This isn't a subdivision, so I'm sure it'll be fine. All right, any other questions before we take it to our Get Business Quick idea? Okay, my Get Business Quick idea this week is call your aunties. Call your aunties and talk to them about how you're frustrated that you don't have enough buyers. Call your aunties and tell them you're frustrated that you don't have enough houses for your buyers to buy. And talk to them and say, hey, can you please ask all your friends if any of them have a house that they know of that I can get my buyer into to take a look at? Aunties love to help their kiddos. So you need to be reaching out to those specific family members to find out who they know and what they know to see if they can drum up some business for you. Give them some.
Mine are dead.
Samantha, now you are the auntie. Somebody give Samantha some aunties. So that's you want to give those ladies business cards. They love to talk about you. Remember when you were single and they told every eligible man that you were available? That was awkward and uncomfortable. But now you can turn that into an asset and have them find you buyers and sellers. So talk to them and give them business cards and encourage them to talk about real estate and to brag about how their niece is in real estate, okay? Or their nephew is in real estate. That's my quick tip idea for this week. Anybody have anything they want to share? Anybody had anything interesting come up in the last week? I will not name her, but one of our agents had something strange come up where the property was not inspection ready. So when they went out to do their inspection, the house and the utilities were not ready for the inspection. So I want to be very clear that when that happens, you need to immediately notify the listing agent and say, hey, this house is not ready. We need to do an extension on the inspection period because we're not actually able to complete this inspection right now. So there is a clause in our purchase agreement under 15, which is the inspection clause, that states that the seller will have the property ready for inspections and they will keep all utilities on. So if you find that utilities are not on, you need to call me and call the listing agent and figure out how to get them turned on, okay? Unfortunately for this agent, that means her client is gonna have to pay an extra fee to have the home inspector come back out. And that's very frustrating because that's through no fault of her clients. But unfortunately, there's nothing in the contract that would obligate the seller or the listing agent to be responsible for that follow-up inspection fee, unfortunately.
I had that happen to me over on Showalter.
Yeah.
And I just picked up the phone and called AEP and they turned it on right then while the inspector was there.
Really?
Yeah.
All
I
right.
just called and I said, I'm in this vacant house and we're having a home inspection and I need the utilities turned on, and they flipped the switch and it all went just fine that day.
I'm not so sure that AAP person should have done that, but okay.
Don't have to ask.
Yeah. Samantha, you just have a way with people. They just do what you want.
They better.
That's right.
I know Guido.
All right. If anybody doesn't have any more questions, I'm going to wish you well today. And thank you very, very much for coming today. And if anybody has any questions, just reach out to me.
Okay. Love you.
Bye, guys.